Hello, Mike here. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the Vaillant Ecotec Plus boiler and the MyVaillant app, which is the smart app that comes with the boiler, as well as a few of the other hardware pieces that make up the smart home boiler. So a couple of months ago, maybe 2 months ago, we replaced our system boiler with a new Vaillant Ecotec combination boiler. We also got rid of the big tank in the roof and the secondary tank and also a cylinder in our air-in cupboard. And this has freed up loads of space and it's great. The reason I went with a Vaillant boiler, we had a Vaillant combination boiler in our previous house and it was brilliant. We had it for at least 10 years. It worked effortlessly. It was easy to service and the Vaillant support or customer service was great. So when it came time to replacing this old boiler of ours, it was a no-brainer. Just came to the website and I picked this particular one because it was smart or said it could be smart. And I've got a smart home and I thought, great, we'll do that. So I got an installer to set everything up and they explained how it all works. So you've got the boiler and then you've also got the sensoCOMFORT. Now these are all extra things that you can purchase, but this is the part that makes the whole boiler smart. And the point of it being smart is that it's going to, or the goal is to allow you to save money. And the way you're going to save money is you've got an extra little device which is called a weather compensation sensor. And this thing sits on the outside of your house, normally on the north face wall. And what it does, it sends the outdoor temperature to this sensoCOMFORT. And the sensoCOMFORT in turn talks to the boiler. And the advantage of something like this is the outside temperature is what determines the flow temperature in the boiler. Now, a traditional boiler has a basic controller or a thermostat that sits on the wall, and you either manually update it, like click on the plus or the minus to adjust the desired temperature, or you set a timer and you tell the timer this is when I want the heating to come on and what the desired temperature is. So the Vaillant does something very similar. You can just go in and you can set your times and the desired temperature. It's great. Where this boiler is a bit smarter is that control temperature or the flow temperature in the boiler is determined by whatever the temperature is outside. Now, a standard system boiler doesn't have that option. It just, when the boiler comes on, it fires up and it heats the water in the pipes to 75 or 70, 75 degrees. So that's very high. And this boiler doesn't do that. If the outside temperature is quite warm, so let's say it's 15 degrees or 10 degrees, it'll only heat up the water in the boiler to 55 or 40. And this is all determined by a curve. So the curves all sit in this thermostat, and we have to pick one. So you would come into this setting, and you'd go in to a heating curve. And what you do is there's a whole bunch of these heating curves. I mean, it starts at I think point 10, and it goes all the way up to 4. And it's basically just a number. So the boiler installer said to us initially, based on his calculations, and this is what generally happens when you get a Vaillant boiler or heat pump, the installer runs some calculations. They work out the area of your house, they work out where the doors are, the windows are, how much insulation you have, are the windows double glaze, single glaze. All of this sort of information is taken into account. Do you have loft insulation? Do you have underfloor heating? And then they plug all this information in, and the tool or app or whatever tells them, okay, this house based on all those criteria, and it also includes radiators, the size of them, the thickness of them, how many vents they have, if are they the thin type, the wide type. I'm sure you've heard of this for people that are on heat pumps. They need bigger, wider radiators. It's very similar. So they plug it all in, and the application comes back and says, right, you should be aiming for a steepness of curve of whatever. Our guy told us your house is 0.80. So I said, okay, what does that mean? So he said, okay, so well, the steepness of the curve, what it does is it uses the outdoor temperature, which is what you can see here at the bottom along the x-axis, and on the y-axis, the vertical, that's the flow temperature. So that's the temperature that's running in the boiler. So when your heating comes on, or let's say you set it to manual and you set the temperature to 20 degrees. So if you've got a curve of zero point 0.8 set, and let's say the outdoor temperature is 10 degrees, so then the flow temperature that the boiler is going to heat up to will be 35 degrees. And that 35 degrees will give you the 20 degrees that you want in your house. So that's the idea. If it was 0 degrees, the boiler will think, okay, hang on, I need to heat up the water to 44 degrees in order to keep the 20-degree desired temperature. And it just follows this curve. At -10, it'll heat the water to 52. Now remember, I said a standard boiler doesn't have all this fancy calculation. It just heats the water up to 70 degrees or 75 or whatever the model is set to, but it's high. It's nothing like this. So a standard old boiler will be costing you a lot more money every time it has to turn on, because it's always going to be pushing that heat to 75 degrees in the pipes to heat up the radiators. And that's where you waste a lot of energy and ultimately money. You're wasting a lot of money because you're using too much energy. You don't need that much energy to heat the water in those pipes. Whereas, as you can see here, on this particular curve, if it was 0 degrees outside, it only needs to heat it to 44. But now, if you up the curve to say 1, if it's 0 degrees outside, it has to heat the water to 48 in order to get the 24 degrees, the 20 degrees, sorry, desired temperature. So that kind of made sense. I thought, great, no problem. So we left it at 0.8. I'm not going to save it at 0.8 because I've currently got it set to 1.1. So here lies the problem. Now you turn on, so okay, wait, let me go back one step. So I also set a control, a weekly planner. So we've got the weekly planner set to 6:30 to 10:30, so 4 hours, and we want the desired temperature to be 19, and we also want the heating then to come on at 3:30 in the afternoon, and it runs till 8:30, and again we want the desired temperature to be 19. But every other hour, so outside of those hours, the temperature, it doesn't matter because the house will be warm or we will be asleep, and we don't care what the temperature is. I mean, it's actually better to not have the temperature at 19 when you sleep in because it's uncomfortable. But then you could just turn down the TRV, the little thermostatic radiator valve. You can adjust it. Then that's just another factor in all of this that I'm going to discuss. So yes, you can do that, or you can come in here and you can set a manual temperature. So I've got a manual temperature set to 20 degrees. Now it's very rare that we actually manually override the weekly timer. But if you were to come in here and say manual, it would set the desired temperature to 20. But it's not instant, and it's not instant because of this heat curve. And that's the thing that you've got to try and get your head around, because it's not like the old days with an old type of boiler where you just walk over to the thermostat, turn it up to 21, the boiler fires up at 75 degrees, which is super hot, And very quickly, you will be getting that lovely 20-degree or whatever temperature in your living room or house. It doesn't work like that. Yeah, even if you set it to 20 and the outdoor temperature say was 0, it's got to go to 50 degrees to get the desired temperature. Now that could take an hour, it could take 2 hours, it could take 3 hours. In fact, there's no way of knowing, because unless you know each of these curves, how long it takes to get to these different desired flow temperatures, it's just a nightmare. You don't know. And that is where, or I should say, leads me to be discussing this topic, because not knowing what heat curve you need to have for your home is the biggest problem. And this is what we've experienced over the period of 2 months. We've never been able to reach the desired temperature. So like, for example, 19. Okay, currently it's 18.6. So I shouldn't say we've never been able to reach. We have, because I think I have figured it out. But it's taken 2 months to figure it out. And it's taken a lot of fiddling and coming into these silly menus, especially the heat curve menu, and making changes and tweaking. And now, to be fair, the boiler installer said you're going to need to try and understand which heat curve you need to be on. And it's not just this heat curve that you need to be messing around with. It's the minimum flow temperature. It's the min and max target flow, which you'll find on the Vaillant sensoCOMFORT. You've actually got to go into this menu. And when you go into that menu, and I mean, that's definitely another video, there's 101 different things that you can possibly turn on and turn off, and each one of those things will have an effect on the heat curve or the steepness of this heating curve, and that will affect the flow temperature. So it's actually better to not fiddle, because the more you fiddle, the more just it becomes a nightmare and not knowing. One way you could keep track of all of this information, because ultimately at the end of the day, these are all little data points that you need to be aware of in order to set the flow temperature. And the flow temperature is what's going to determine the desired temperature. So you could build a spreadsheet and set your desired temperature to 20 and say your minimum flow is 23, and plot out these different outdoor temperatures into columns, and then monitor it on a day-to-day basis based on what you see here on the front screen, outdoor temperature, because this is what controls it. It's the outdoor temperature that is determining the flow temperature. So like right now, my flow temperature, let's go back, it's not that menu, it's this one, control heating curve. I'm currently on a curve of 1.1. It's currently 10 or 11 degrees outside. And so I'm expecting a flow temperature of 39. That would be the target flow temperature, 39, in order to get me to the 19 degrees. And again, this screen doesn't reflect the 19 degrees. You notice how it's got a 20 there. It should really say 19. So over here, 19, and that's why I find this app so frustrating. But anyway, 19, 19 desired temperature, and it is about 10 or 11 degrees outside, so 38, 37, round about there. So now on the screen, I would like to see what the flow temperature is, but of course it's not on the screen because this app is so badly written or created. It's terrible. Now for me to go and see what the current flow temperature is, I have to go back 4 menus, and then I've got to click into this chart over here and go into system view, and there, actual flow temperature 37.5. Okay, 37.5, remember that. Oh man, I didn't mean to go out. 37.5, control heating. So, oh, and what was the outdoor temperature? And now you can see the frustration here because you haven't got all the information on the screen. It's 11.3. I'm just going to write this down. It was 37.5, the flow temperature. So now when I go into the heat curve and I go into control, heat curve, heat curve. So it's 11, so we're round about over here, and it's 35.5. So roughly that's about right. I mean, I don't know what the next number is here, but there's quite a big gap between 24 and 39. So I'm guessing 35 is pretty close. I mean, we're not exactly on the desired temperature yet. We're zero point 0.5 away, but we're close. So that curve is pretty much spot on, I would say, to what I'm looking for. So imagine now, I'm actually saving quite a bit of money because it's quite a low um, flow temperature, and I'm I'm almost getting the heat that I want in my house. On my old boiler, this thing would have been up and above 71 degrees, and I would still be getting the 19.5 or 18.5 heat in. But it would be costing me a lot more money to get that temperature, or a lot of wasted energy that I didn't need to be burning to get to that temperature. And that's where this boiler comes into its own. The problem I have though is there's a lot of tweaking and trying to see what all of the information is. And I don't see that information on the screen, on this screen. It's on different menus. Now there's this thing in the programming world called the rule of three, in that you should never make your user click or mouse click or finger tap more than 3 times to get anywhere. So, and the reason I say that is you look at the screen. I mean, look at the wasted space on it. There could be these icons could be bigger. And let's say I want to go to the weekly timer. Now there's a little timer there, and oh, there's a timer control, but I can't do anything. This is just a one-click operation mode. This is I can switch this between the time control or the manual or the heating off. Okay, fine. Um, it's a bit of a pointless menu, really. I want to go to that weekly timer. So now I've got to go into the settings. 1, 2, 3. I'm already past now the user starting to get annoyed because they're having to tap through so many screens. 4. And finally I'm here, but now I still need to click on something. So now I'm going to go and adjust this time. I'm going to switch it off because I want to show you something. So before I switch it off, let me just go back. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 screens. I've got to get to that weekly timer, which is annoying. You can see on the screen right now that the boiler is on. I know it's on because I can see these 3 little lines, and I can see these hot flares around here, and also I can see that the desired temperature is 19 and the current temperature is 18. So it's on and we're working towards the 19. That's the goal. Okay. Now I'm going to go to the weekly timer, and I'm going to switch off the heating. So another 4 clicks to get there, which is annoying. And I'm going to change this to 1630. I still want that at 830, and that's another annoying thing. I didn't change it. It just did it for me. Sometimes you just like to have your same settings without changing things. So I set it and I save it. Okay, so now we're going to go back. So it's off right now. And when it's off, I want the setback temperature to be 16. So that's the desired temperature. And again, they use different terms for different things. Like if you read the manual talks about the desired temperature, and then it talks about the setback temperature. Well, this is the setback temperature. You'll see now it's going to drop to 16, which is the setback temperature. 19 was the desired temperature, and when I turn the boiler off, because it's going to be outside of the timer, it should go back to 16 any minute now. Now I wonder if it's saved. Let me just go and check it one more time. The setback temperature is 16, and I said, no, it didn't save it, which is weird because I could have sworn, oh no, 1630, it did save it. So that's fine, 1630, it's correct. So has it changed it? Well, no, it hasn't changed it. It's outside of the timer right now. I said the boiler must come on at 16:30. It's now 16:20, so it hasn't updated it. And this is another of the annoying things about the app. Why hasn't it changed it? I mean, I just made the change. 16:30. I'm on Sunday. Look, it's failed. Something's failed. The maximum number of time window items is, please remove at least one. Well, I only had two, so that's not the maximum. I know it's failed because I can see there's an error. And so there's an error. The app is showing errors. Great. Try again. Boom, now it's working again. And look, it's set the desired temperature to 16, which is correct, or not the desired, the setback temperature to 16. It's correct. So we're outside of the boiler now. It should be off. But this is the thing, it's not off because look, it's still showing as burning or heating, and you can see the flares along the side here, and that's wrong. Why is it showing me that? If I set the boiler to off, and this is when you go on holiday, you'd hit the heating off and you say set. This is the thing, it tells you immediately that the boiler is off. So you can see the boiler is off, no problem. I'm going to turn it back on to timer. And remember, the timer is set for 16:30 tonight. It's going to come on at 16:30. So currently it's off. And yet you wouldn't know it because it hasn't updated yet, even though I did change this. Back to timer. I can't even change it to set because I've already done it. It's just so slow. There we go. It's back again. Woohoo. Now, this has shown me that the boiler is off. This is correct. This is what I'm expecting to see always when it's outside of the timer. But you'll see a few seconds more, and it will suddenly pop up with the little radiator sign, and you'll see the red flares appearing. And that's where there's some sort of disconnect with the software. Oddly enough, it's not doing it now, but rest assured, I know this thing is still on. It's just the software is not working. Let me quit out of the software and I'll load it back up. There we go. That's how I knew it was broken. So it is off. It's 16:23 right now, but yet somehow it's showing it here as on. So I don't know. It's just so frustrating. What else can I show you? Silly, useless icons that appear on the front screen, like these little four things. Now let's just make a note of what we can see on the screen before I click into there. But here is the operation mode. I can see that it's on timer. There's the outdoor temperature, humidity. Like this humidity makes no difference to my life or the app or anything. So why even have it on the front screen? You know, what would be really impressive if I could quickly go into the weekly schedule, because that's something that I make a lot of changes to, or that heating curve. But alas, it's not on here. Now watch here. I click these four little boxes and oh, I see humidity again, the desired or setback temperature, the current temperature, and the time controller. But like, why? Why are you here? It's just a wasted icon. And then you've got the chart icon, and this is where you can come in normally and you can see consumption data. But normally on a Sunday, right about this time, it switches off because it's now trying to collect its data. But in here, under the system view, you also get to see the bar and the actual flow temperature. So the flow temperature now has dropped. Remember, it was about 37 point something, which we knew was correct at the time, but it's dropping now because it's outside of the timer. Go back to the water pressure. This is such a key data point because a combination boiler, you should always keep the water pressure above 1. Now, today at about 10 o'clock, I got an alert through my Google speaker that my boiler's water pressure was below 1. And the only reason I got that was because I've set up an automation using Home Assistant. And this is the next topic that I want to cover is Home Assistant. I've built my own dashboard and I've plugged myself into the MyVaillant app or API. So I'm able to extract all information that's in that app, and I can create my own app through Home Assistant. Now, what's powerful about Home Assistant is I can see all this key information all on one screen. I can't do that on this screen. Here I'm only seeing desired temperature or setback temperature, outdoor temperature. Where's the current flow temperature? Where's the water pressure? Where's the minimum flow temperature or the maximum flow temperature? It's nowhere because I can't get that information. But on on my Home Assistant, I can look outdoor temperature, indoor temperature. There's the desired. There's the water pressure. There's the current flow temperature. I can also see that the boiler is off. See, at the moment, it's saying heating state idle. That means it's off. Yet, it's telling me it's on. That's why this app's rubbish. So, I don't use the app anymore. I very rarely go into the app, if ever. The only thing I would do is go in and maybe change the curve because I'm still experimenting and trying to understand which curve is the correct curve. But this is where Home Assistant is so powerful. I can see all this information, and not only can I see it, say, for example, the home system water pressure. This was the alert that I got this morning. So if I click on this, it opens up a chart, and I've got a full history of the water pressure. Now, this is the past, 24 hours. So you can see yesterday, and whenever it's offline, it drops down to whatever the minimum is. So the minimum was 1, and that's why I set an alert so that if it drops below 1, I wanted to alert me. And this is when it did it, and it alerted me there. And then, in fact, it alerted my wife, and she said it came through the Google speaker. And I was like, really? I didn't know that. And then it happened again at this time. So this is great. Home Assistant is very helpful in that now I know I need to go up into the loft and I need to put more water into the system so that the pressure is right. And where Home Assistant is really powerful is, as I say, I can now see a 24-hour view, but hey, what if I want to see last week? And you can see now last week we were on holiday, so yes, there were times when, because I also turned the boiler off, the pressure in the boiler dropped below 1 bar because it was off. So it dropped to 0.9, and it did it a few times. And then we came back on the 6th, but or we came back on the 7th. I think on the 6th, I turned on the boiler remotely from the Netherlands. And that's another thing that's so great about having a smart boiler like this one is like I'm able to control the heating wherever I am in the world. I happen to be in the Netherlands, so I was able to turn it on, and it all started to work. And then you can see the pressure stayed at 1. So that's what's very useful with this type of information. Now, this is Home Assistant on my mobile. I can, of course, load Home Assistant on my PC. So let me just quickly flick back to the MyVaillant app, because remember I said at 16:30 I set the boiler to come on, even though it looks like the boiler is already on. So it's 16:29 right now, but on Home Assistant, I know for a fact that it's off. So there it's saying it's idle, and there you can just see a sliver of blue, so that's telling me that it's idle. And you'll see now at 16:30 it's going to come on, but it's going to make no difference to this screen. The only thing that's going to change here is that setback temperature will change from 16 to 19 degrees because that's the desired temperature. Any second now we'll see this change, and on this screen I probably just have to refresh the screen to change it from idle, but I won't do anything just yet. There we go, it did it automatically. It's heating up. The desired temperature has changed to 19, so it changed on the app as well. So we know that is the way to tell if the boiler is on or off, is just by looking at this big number. If it drops to 16, it's off, even though it's telling you that it's on. That's why the app is crap. Whereas with Home Assistant, I now see all this information all on one screen. I can do various tweaks and changes, and this leads me to the next thing, and that's about setting that curve, because that's really the crux of this video, is trying to understand which curve I'm meant to be on. And I'm pretty sure anybody who's got this boiler and has had that little mini crash course with their installer is probably in the same boat if they are only using the app, is knowing or not knowing what curve they should be on. They might be on 1.4, which is extremely high. It's unnecessary. You don't need to be on such a high curve. Look how steep it is. Look at the high numbers that the flow temperature could potentially go to. I mean, you honestly don't need, unless your house is totally insulation, you don't have any insulation, then yes, maybe you do need to have these high um, steepness of curve. But from my experience, and our house is double glazed, um, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom house with normal set of windows. We have a conservatory that might add another factor to everything, because that one room has about, well, the whole room, 3 sides of the room are made of glass, double glazed. So that room never reaches the desired temperature. Even if I set the radiator thermostatic valves to 5, it makes no difference. The temperature in that room only ever gets up to about 16, which is fine. We're not in that room for the winter time, if any time. We walk through it and that's it. We close the door. So it doesn't matter. But those are all the types of factors that will determine this curve. But if you are only using the app and you are trying to understand which curve that you should be using here and what minimum flow you should be on, and also in the sensoCOMFORT, if that's what you've got, there's some field or a value called room temperature mod. Now that room temperature mod has 3 settings. It has inactive, active, and manual or overwrite or something like that. But the boiler guy told me you never need to worry about setting it to the third option. It's either on or off. And for a long time, I had it off. And the off basically means room temperature mod, that it's going to rely on completely the outdoor temperature, and which is, if you look at this home assistant chart that I've got here, on this chart, I've got the current flow, the indoor temperature, the outdoor temperature, the desired temperature, and I've got a heating status. So all of this key information that I can see in one place, which you can't see on this screen, and you definitely can't see it on the home screen. So the app is pretty much useless. I can see all this information in one place. And then you can start to understand or try and understand which heat curve you need to be on. So I've actually got heat curve at the bottom here. So you can see for this period, which is from the 12th, so 3 days roughly, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 4 days, sorry. 4 days, I can, and I've had it at 1.1 the whole time, I can see what's going on. I can't see it, what's going on with this app. But that desired temperature, and the way this boiler now works is, depending on the outdoor temperature, if the outdoor temperature drops, the flow temperature will increase. That's just how it works. That's the idea. And it's a different mindset, because if you have the old type of boiler, when it gets cold outside, it gets cold indoors. So what do? You walk over to your thermostat and you turn it up. So your boiler fires up at 75 degrees and sets that flow temperature to 75 degrees, and you get a lovely warm heat coming out of your radiators, which is great, but it's costing you money. For me, the flow temperature is determined by that curve. So instead of 75-degree heat, my curve is saying, right, the temperature, let's say on the 12th at, where's the time here? This one here. So you can see the curve. If after a while when you start looking at this a lot, you actually start to realize what's going on here. All of this air, all of this time here where it's just up and down, up and down, up and down, nothing's really happening here. The boiler's off. It's when it peaks, it's hitting 40 degrees. That's the current flow temperature. So it's at 40 degrees or 39.5. The outdoor temperature was 6. So now if I go to my graph, 6, yeah, it's around about 40. I mean 39. I don't know. I don't know what um, I don't know what you call it, the gradient or what each of these points are in between. But there's 11-degree temperature difference here. So 1 degree, it's you've just got to work it out. So where it's spiked here, 39.5, the temperature outdoors was 6. So 6 is around about there. Yeah, that's about right on the curve. That's the right temperature. And then it's outside of the, and that's during the timer, the morning. So 8 o'clock in the morning, it's on the timer. It hits the maximum flow temperature, and then it drops off because it's outside of the timer, and it drops right down. It can only go down to 23 degrees because that's what I've set it there for this curve. So it drops all the way down to roughly 23, I said. So there it went 22.5, but it realized its mistake and then went back up. But basically that's it's low it's going to go, and then it increases back up because it's now afternoon. 4 o'clock is when I had the timer back on, and at the very peak it ever gets to is around about 38, 37, and that's then determined by the outside temperature. And you can see the temperature has increased slightly by a degree or two, and that's why it hasn't gone full max 40. It's only doing 37. The green line is the desired temperature, and that's useful because um, you can now see the indoor temperature. It's going down and it's going up. This is when it's during the timer, and there, look, I actually hit the well, at that point there I nearly hit the desired temperature of 19, and then it drops off. And all of this time is when it's outside the timer, and then again. So at this point I could see that it's not really hitting the desired, but actually, the temperature at 18.4, 18.5 is actually quite nice. You don't need to be at 19. And that's the other thing about having a smart boiler. You suddenly realize that, you don't need to be sitting at peak temperature 19, 20, 21. You're just wasting energy, and it's costing you a lot of money, especially if you're on an old boiler. So visually, I can see, actually, we don't need to be running this boiler even at 19. So with this information, I can now go back and go to the heating, go to the weekly planner, and at those temperatures, 19, I could maybe down this by zero point 0.5. It doesn't need to be at 19. And we were comfortable on all of these different days. So that's what's so useful about having this data at my fingertips. I can now realize, well, actually, this heat curve is working, but let's just say I wanted to drop it. So this is where this is so cool. I can go in here and I'm going to change this to, this is the heat curve. Oh no, this is the total chart. I'm going to change this to 240 hours, and I'm going to save it, and I'm going to go done. And now you can actually see this was when we were on holiday. This is when it's flatlined because I'd set the boiler to off. So it would have dropped down to, I think, a maximum of 10 degrees. It never got there because the house is quite well insulated. But you can see the flow drop down. Everything's dropped. And then when we were in the Netherlands coming home, I turned on the boiler from wherever we were stopped on the side of the road. And yeah, you can see everything starts coming online. There, the temperature, the desired temperature, I set it to a higher desired temperature of 21 because I thought I wanted to heat up. But now, yeah, lies the problem. At 1.1, because the heater had been off for so long, it was off for a week, and the flow temperature had dropped so low, and the house temperature was so low, it was at 13. It took ages for the heating to get up to the desired temperature. In fact, it took a whole day. We got back and the house wasn't warm. I mean, it was, what was it here? It was 16 or something. So it was less than 16. It was around 16. And I'd set the desired temperature initially, it was on 19, and then I upped it because it wasn't warming up fast enough. So I set it to 21. But here's the thing, that particular heat curve wasn't right. So I adjusted it and I made it 1.2, and you can see how quickly it heats up because now we've increased the flow temperature. We changed the curve. And if I go back here, you can see if I go into this thing and I set this, so look, what is the temperature here? 10 is 39. Let's set this to 1.2. It's suddenly a 1 degree higher. So the higher you set your heat curve, the faster it should heat, but it's going to cost you. So that's why you should always aim for a lower curve to get the lower flow temperatures. But you can see it in the data. And also, I wasn't sure because it didn't seem to heat up quickly enough. So I only had that heat curve for a couple of hours, and then I dropped it back down to 1. And then suddenly it got a little bit warmer and the temperature in the house then peaked and we got the desired temperature that we wanted. And again, I wouldn't have been able to figure this out if I was just relying on this app, because this app doesn't tell me anything. It's so frustrating having to click in and out of menus, but I can always just come to Home Assistant, and it is literally every morning. I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is I open up Home Assistant and I just go to my screen and I can see all the key information. Straight away I can see the pressure. I can see, and you can see, yeah, on the 6th to 8th December, maybe I can see it better on this screen, 6th to the 8th of December, right about here. You can see on the day when I was trying to heat up the house, we used a lot more electricity. Look at this big yellow bar. This was when it was on, and I think it was on manual at that time. So it started quite early and it just ran the whole day. We were just trying to get the heat up, because the minute you can get the heat up to the desired temperature, then the flow temperature will always drop, which is what it did. You can see it was peaking at 45 and then we got the desired temperature and then it dropped. Now, if that was a normal boiler, it would have carried on in the 70s. I mean, it would be off this chart. That's how ridiculous and how much money you potentially wasting with an old boiler. But yeah, and I can see all that information on the screen, which is so useful. So my goal every day is to have more blue chart than yellow. Yellow is when it's running during the peak or during the timer, and all the blues are when it's outside. And that's my goal, is to have more blue than yellow. And obviously, the closer we get to spring, this will get smaller and smaller, and that's the goal. But at the moment, I'm trying to keep the heating and everything to around about £3, £3.50, round about there, because anything more than that is just a waste. So like yesterday, the temperature did drop, so of course it cost a little bit more money, £4.35. But again, I've got all this data at hand. I can go in and I can say, I want to see this last week. So from the 9th, say, to the 15th, and I can see what it's cost me. And I can then also add other entities and things to this. So let's say I can now look, why did it cost that much on certain days? Well, I'll add the outdoor temperature. Let's see if there's some sort of correlation. And you can see what's going on here. It's now quite low here, 3.5, 3.5. What's happened? The temperature did drop and then it started to increase. So, and then it's increased big time. So it seems like, obviously, when the outdoor temperature is increasing, you shouldn't be using a lot more gas. So, but it's just interesting that you've got all this information at your fingertips. If only the MyVaillant app could show a third of what I can see on the screen right here, it would be so useful. Anyway, this video has gone on long enough. So if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. If you want to know how I built all of these charts and graphs and things, let me know as well.